My mother didn't destroy my catering business by stealing my recipes, or poaching my clients, or burning down my commercial kitchen. She destroyed it with whispers. She stood in the center of her warm, inviting, beloved family restaurant, and she told local brides that my kitchen was dirty. She told corporate venue managers that I cut corners on ingredient temperatures. She told the entire community that I had once poisoned a table of guests who had never even eaten my food. She used her reputation as the sweet, hard-working matriarch of the town to slowly, methodically dismantle my entire life simply because I had dared to build a business without her permission. But my mother forgot one crucial detail. I wasn't just a caterer. I was a certified food safety auditor, and while she was pointing her finger at my kitchen, I started looking at hers. My name is Lena Hart. I am 32 years old, and up until the whispers started, I was the proud owner of Lena's Table Catering. My commercial kitchen was my sanctuary. It wasn't the largest operation in the city, but it was arguably the cleanest. I ran my business with the rigid, absolute precision of a surgical operating room. I didn't just cook food. I understood the profound scientific responsibility of feeding large groups of people. It was a Tuesday morning, and my kitchen was running at peak efficiency. The stainless steel prep tables gleamed under the bright fluorescent lights. The air smelled of roasted garlic and fresh herbs, but beneath that, there was the faint, reassuring scent of industrial sanitizer. I stood near the heavy double doors of the walk-in cooler, holding a calibrated digital probe thermometer. I pulled a massive tray of herb-roasted chicken from the cooling rack, inserted the probe into the thickest part of the meat, and waited for the digital readout to stabilize. 165 degrees exactly, I called out, pulling the probe and immediately wiping it down with an alcohol swab. Nora, my lead prep cook and right-hand woman, was standing at the adjacent station, meticulously dicing vegetables. She was wearing a fresh apron and blue nitrile gloves. She picked up a bright green sticker, wrote the time, date, and temperature on it with a permanent marker, and slapped it firmly onto the side of the cooling rack. Logged and tagged. Boss, Nora said, smiling as she chopped. Honestly, Lena, I've worked in high-end hotel kitchens that aren't half as organized as this place. Nobody runs a kitchen as clean as you do. When you're feeding 300 people at a wedding. Nora, cleanliness isn't a preference, I replied, pulling off my gloves and washing my hands at the dedicated sink. It's the only thing standing between a perfect night and a mass casualty event. Are the seafood deliveries verified? Verified, temp-checked upon arrival, and stored on the lowest shelf of the walk-in, away from the raw poultry. Nora confirmed, reciting the protocol flawlessly. I smiled. We were prepping for the largest contract I had ever secured since opening my business 2 years ago. A massive 300-guest outdoor wedding at the most prestigious botanical garden venue in the county. It was a $50,000 contract. It was the job that was finally going to allow me to pay off my initial small business loan and perhaps even hire a second delivery crew. I was exhausted, but I was incredibly happy. I was finally standing on my own 2 feet. The heavy metal door of the kitchen swung open. "Well, don't you all look busy?" a voice called out, instantly cutting through the rhythmic hum of the kitchen. I turned around and felt the familiar, automatic tightening in my chest. It was my mother, Marianne Hart. Marianne was 60 years old. She was wearing a beautifully knit cardigan over a floral blouse, her silver hair perfectly styled. To the outside world, she was the epitome of the sweet, traditional, hard-working restaurant owner. She had run Marianne's Table, a local staple, for over 30 years. She sponsored the local Little League teams. She donated leftover bread to the church. She was universally beloved. But I knew the woman beneath the cardigan. I had grown up in the hot, cramped kitchen of her restaurant. I spent my entire childhood washing dishes, scrubbing floors, and desperately trying to earn her approval. But Marianne didn't view me as a daughter to be nurtured. She viewed me as an extension of her own ego. Whenever I tried to introduce a new recipe or suggest a more efficient prep method, she would shoot me down with a condescending sigh. "You're just a prep cook, Lena," she would say, patting my cheek patronizingly. "One day you'll understand. Without me guiding you, you're nothing in this industry." When I finally saved enough money to leave her restaurant and open my own catering business, she didn't congratulate me. She looked at me with cold, furious disbelief, as if I had committed the ultimate act of treason. "Mom," I said, forcing a polite smile as I walked over to her, "what are you doing here?" "We're right in the middle of prep for the Sterling wedding." Marianne looked around my pristine, gleaming kitchen. She didn't look impressed. She looked exactly like a landlord inspecting a property she believed she still owned. "I just came to check on my little girl," Marianne said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She reached out and ran a finger along the edge of a stainless steel table. 300 people. That's a very big job, Lena. A very stressful job. We're perfectly on schedule, I assured her, keeping my posture straight. Marianne smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice so Nora couldn't hear. "I just worry about you, honey," Marianne whispered, her tone laced with a perfectly calibrated dose of poison. "You know how you get when you're overwhelmed. You rush things. You cut corners. I'd hate for you to take on more than you can handle and make a terrible mistake. The Sterling family is very influential. If someone gets sick because you didn't cook the chicken long enough, well, that would be the end of your little business, wouldn't it?" I stared at her. The implication was entirely manufactured. I had never cut a corner in my life. I was a literal, certified auditor of food safety, but she knew exactly how to trigger my deepest anxieties. "The chicken is temped at 165, Mom," I said, my voice hardening slightly. "We don't cut corners here." Marianne patted my arm, feigning maternal concern. "Of course, dear, I'm just looking out for you. Remember, if it all gets to be too much, my kitchen always has a spot for you on the prep line." She turned and walked out the door, leaving behind a thick, suffocating cloud of tension. I took a deep breath, pushing the anger down, and went back to work. I thought it was just another one of her petty attempts to undermine my confidence. I didn't know she had already planted the bomb. The first cancellation happened 3 days later. I was sitting in my small office, finalizing the linen counts for a corporate luncheon scheduled for next month, when my phone rang. It was Diane, the event coordinator for a mid-sized tech company that had booked me for their quarterly retreat. "Hi, Lena," Diane said. Her voice was tight, incredibly uncomfortable. "Listen, I'm calling about our contract for the 14th. "Hi, Diane. Sure, I have the file right here," I said cheerfully. "Do you need to adjust the head count?" "Actually, we need to cancel the contract," Diane said quickly. "We've decided to go in a different direction for the catering." I frowned, caught completely off guard. "Cancel?" "Diane, we're less than 3 weeks out. The deposit is non-refundable at this point. Is there a problem with the menu?" There was a long, heavy pause on the line. "Look, Lena, I really liked your tasting menu," Diane said, lowering her voice as if she were afraid of being overheard. "But my boss was at a community fundraiser last night. And, well, she heard some things. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, but corporate doesn't want to take the liability risk." "What things?" I asked, a cold knot forming in my stomach. "Liability risk for what?" "Someone mentioned that your kitchen failed a recent internal audit," Diane said nervously, "and that you had an incident last year where a group of guests got severe food poisoning. We just can't risk our employees getting sick." "I'm sorry, Lena. The cancellation is final." She hung up before I could say another word. I sat at my desk, staring at the phone in complete shock. Failed an audit? Food poisoning? I had never had a single guest report an illness in 2 years of operation. My health inspection scores were publicly posted online, and they were flawless. 2 hours later, the phone rang again. This time, It was Evan, the venue manager for a highly lucrative country club that frequently referred brides to my company. "Lena, what the hell is going on over there?" Evan asked bluntly the moment I answered. "Evan, I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, my hands starting to shake. "I've had 2 of my brides call me this morning, panicked, asking if they can break their catering contracts with you without losing their venue deposit." Evan said, his voice laced with frustration. "They're saying there's a rumor going around the bridal groups that you're using expired ingredients to cut costs, and that you're hiring unlicensed staff off the street to save money." "That's a lie," I said loudly, standing up from my desk. "Evan, you know how I run my kitchen. You've seen my health department certificates." "I know, Lena, but brides don't care about certificates when they're terrified of poisoning their families on their wedding day." Evan sighed. "Where is this coming from? Did you piss off a competitor?" "I don't know," I whispered, though the cold, terrifying realization was already beginning to seep into my bones. "Well, you need to fix it fast," Evan warned me, "because right now, I can't in good conscience recommend Lena's table to my clients. I have to protect my venue's reputation. I'm pausing all future referrals until this blows over." He hung up. By the end of the week, the whispers had turned into a roar. I lost 3 more corporate contracts. I lost 2 small weddings. The rumors were incredibly specific, and they were designed perfectly to target these exact fears of my client base. They didn't say I was a bad cook. They said I was dangerous. They said I was reckless. I tried to fight back. I emailed my clients PDFs of my impeccable health inspection reports. I posted photos of my spotless kitchen and my temperature logs on my business social media pages. I offered to let any client come and physically inspect my walk-in cooler. But reputation is a fragile, terrifying thing. In the food industry, logic does not override fear. If a bride hears a rumor that your chicken will send her grandmother to the hospital, no amount of paperwork will convince her to sign a contract. The final devastating blow landed on Friday afternoon. I was in the kitchen with Nora, prepping a small order for the weekend, when my phone rang. I saw the name on the caller ID, and my heart dropped into my stomach. It was Mrs. Sterling, the mother of the bride for the massive 300-guest, $50,000 wedding. I answered the phone, my hand trembling so badly, I almost dropped the device. "Lena," Mrs. Sterling said. She was crying. "I am so sorry. Mrs. Sterling, please," I begged, abandoning all professional distance. "Please, whatever you've heard, it isn't true. My kitchen is spotless. I will personally guarantee the safety of every single plate." "I can't do it, Lena," she sobbed. "I just can't. My daughter is having panic attacks. We were at Marianne's table for dinner last night, and your mother, she just looked so heartbroken. She pulled me aside and told me that she loves you, but she couldn't live with herself if something happened at our wedding because you were in over your head." The world stopped spinning. The ambient hum of the refrigerators faded into complete silence. "Your mother pulled me aside. She said, 'You've been struggling financially,'" Mrs. Sterling continued, crying softly. "She said you've been buying discount meat left out on loading docks because you can't afford the premium suppliers. Lena, she's your own mother. Why would she lie about something like that?" "Mrs. Sterling," I whispered, the betrayal hitting me with such force I had to lean against the stainless steel table to keep from collapsing. "We're going with a corporate catering company," she said quickly. "Keep the deposit. Just, please don't contact us again." The line went dead. I slowly lowered the phone. It wasn't a competitor. It wasn't a disgruntled former employee. It was my own mother. Marianne wasn't just spreading rumors. She was actively weaponizing her reputation as the sweet, concerned matriarch to destroy my livelihood. She was using the exact language she knew would terrify a mother planning a wedding. And because she was my mother, because the community trusted her implicitly, everyone believed her. No one would ever suspect a mother of lying to destroy her own daughter. I walked into the walk-in cooler. The heavy, insulated door clicked shut behind me, sealing me in the cold, quiet space. I looked at the shelves. They were packed with thousands of dollars worth of perfectly prepped, meticulously labeled ingredients for the Sterling wedding. Trays of marinated chicken, bins of organic vegetables, expensive imported cheeses. It was all useless now. Without the final payment from the Sterling contract, I couldn't cover the cost of the ingredients I had already purchased. The door of the cooler opened. Nora stepped inside, wrapping her arms around herself in the freezing air. She looked at my face, and she looked at the massive trays of prepped food. She knew. Nora didn't ask what happened. She just looked at me, her eyes filled with quiet, absolute terror. "Lena," Nora asked, her voice cracking slightly, "are we going to be able to make payroll this week?" I looked at my lead prep cook. I thought about the bank loan currently hanging over my head. I thought about the rent for the commercial kitchen. "I don't know, Nora," I whispered. I had played by the rules. I had scrubbed the floors. I had logged the temperatures. I had built a perfect, clean kitchen, and my mother had burned it to the ground without ever striking a match. But as I stood in the freezing cooler, staring at the ruined food, the crushing despair slowly began to recede, replaced by something entirely different. It was a cold, sharp, and incredibly precise anger. Marianne wanted to play a game of health and safety. She wanted to use the fear of an unclean kitchen to destroy my life. She had just declared war on a certified food safety auditor, and she had absolutely no idea what kind of monsters were hiding in her own walls. The following evening, my phone rang. It was Marianne. "Lena, sweetheart," my mother said, her voice dripping with maternal warmth. "I heard about the Sterling wedding cancellation. I am just so heartbroken for you. Please, come to the restaurant tonight. I'll have the kitchen make your favorite pasta. Let's just sit down and talk." I didn't want to go. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to stay away from her, but a small, pathetic part of me, the daughter who had spent her entire childhood scrubbing pots just to get a smile of approval, still desperately wanted to believe that Mrs. Sterling had misunderstood her. I wanted to look my mother in the eye and hear her deny it. I arrived at Marianne's table at 8 o'clock. The restaurant was packed. It was a cozy, rustic space with warm amber lighting, checkered tablecloths, and walls covered in framed community awards and glowing newspaper reviews. Marianne was holding court in the center of the dining room, laughing with a table of local politicians. When she saw me, she excused herself, walked over, and pulled me into a tight, highly visible embrace. "My poor girl," Marianne murmured loudly enough for the adjacent tables to hear. She kissed my cheek. She led me to a private booth in the back. A steaming plate of pasta and a glass of expensive red wine were already waiting for me. "Eat, Lena. You look exhausted," Marianne said, taking a sip of her own wine, looking at me with an expression of deep, manufactured pity. "I know things are bad right now. Word travels fast in this town. People are scared. They're scared because of lies, Mom," I said, ignoring the food, looking directly into her eyes. "Mrs. Sterling told me you spoke to her. She said you told her I was buying discount, unsafe meat. Why would you say that?" Marianne didn't flinch. She didn't look guilty. She just offered a sad, patronizing sigh. "Oh, Lena, you know how these wealthy brides panic," Marianne said smoothly, waving her hand dismissively. "I simply told her that independent catering is incredibly difficult and that sometimes young business owners struggle with premium supply chains. I was defending you, honey. I was trying to lower her expectations so she wouldn't be disappointed." It was a brilliant, terrifying lie. She had weaponized the concept of maternal concern so perfectly that, even if Mrs. Sterling repeated the conversation verbatim, Marianne could just claim her words were twisted. "I've lost 4 contracts in 3 days," I said, my voice tight. "My bank is going to freeze my operating loan if I don't secure new revenue by the end of the month. I might have to close the kitchen." Marianne leaned forward across the table. The pity vanished from her eyes, replaced by a sharp, calculating gleam. This was the moment she had been waiting for. This was the trap closing. "You don't have to close, Lena," Marianne said softly. "I can fix this. I can save you." "Save me? How?" "Come back home." Marianne smiled, reaching out to cover my hand with hers. "Close your commercial kitchen lease. Move your equipment into my secondary prep space in the back. We'll absorb your business. Lena's table can become a specialized catering branch of Marianne's table." I stared at her, feeling a cold chill run down my spine. "I have the reputation, Lena," she continued, her voice hypnotic, persuasive. "If I put my name on your catering contracts, the brides will come flooding back. The corporate venues will reinstate you immediately. They trust me. And in exchange?" I asked quietly. "In exchange, you work under my corporate umbrella," Marianne said, her smile widening into a triumphant smirk. "I handle the finances, I approve the menus, and we put out a small press release announcing the merger. Just a little statement saying that you realized you needed your mother's guidance to handle the pressure of the industry." I pulled my hand away from hers as if I had been burned. It was never about food safety. It was never about protecting the community. She didn't just want to destroy my business. She wanted to publicly break me, force me to crawl back to her on my hands and knees, and then parade me in front of the town as the prodigal daughter who had failed on her own and needed her mommy to rescue her. She wanted to absorb my talent and take the credit for it, just like she had done when I was a teenager working on her prep line. "No," I said, standing up from the booth. Marianne's smile vanished. "Excuse me, I am not closing my business. I am not giving you my name, and I am certainly not issuing a press release saying I failed," I said, my voice low and steady. "I know exactly what you're doing, Mom." Marianne's face hardened into a mask of pure, ugly resentment. "You are drowning, Lena," Marianne hissed, dropping the sweet mother persona entirely. "You have no clients. You have no money. The whole town thinks your kitchen is a biohazard. You cannot win against me in the very industry that I taught you." "Watch me," I said. I turned and walked out of the restaurant. "You'll be back," Marianne called out after me, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You should come back before you lose absolutely everything." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment, drafting crisis management emails, trying to figure out how to survive the month without the sterling contract. The next morning, I arrived at my commercial kitchen at 6 o'clock. Nora was already there, quietly prepping a small order for a 20-person office lunch, the only contract we had left for the entire week. At exactly 8:30, the heavy metal door of the kitchen opened. It wasn't a delivery driver, a man in his late 40s, wearing a crisp windbreaker with the official county seal printed on the chest, walked into the kitchen. He was holding a metal clipboard and a digital temperature probe. He didn't smile. "Lena Hart?" the man asked. "Yes," I answered, my heart giving a sudden, violent lurch. "I'm Inspector Grant with the County Department of Public Health," he said, holding up his official badge. "We received a highly detailed, anonymous complaint regarding severe food safety violations at this facility. I am here to conduct an unannounced, comprehensive health inspection. I need you to step away from the prep tables immediately." Nora dropped her knife. She looked at me, terrified. If you fail a surprise health inspection, they don't just give you a warning. They issue a public citation. In some cases, they force you to shut down operations until the violations are corrected. If a citation hit the public registry right now, while the rumors were already swirling, my business would be dead by sunset. My mother hadn't just stopped at whispering to brides. She had weaponized the local government against me. "Of course, Inspector," I said. My voice didn't shake. I didn't panic, because my mother had forgotten the golden rule of setting a trap. You have to make sure your victim is actually guilty. I stepped back from the stainless steel tables and crossed my arms. "The kitchen is yours, Inspector." For the next 2 hours, Inspector Grant tore my commercial kitchen apart, He didn't just do a surface sweep. Because the complaint was specifically targeted at foodborne illness risks, he executed a deep dive audit. He walked into the walk-in cooler. He pulled out his calibrated thermometer and probed the raw meats. He checked the ambient air temperature of the refrigeration units. He pulled out my heavy binder of daily temperature logs, cross-referencing the dates with my delivery manifests to ensure nothing was sitting past its expiration. He checked the dry storage. He used a high-powered flashlight to inspect the dark corners behind the heavy flour bins, looking for mouse droppings or cockroach casings. He checked the chemical storage area to ensure the industrial sanitizers were kept strictly away from the food prep zones. He inspected the dish pit, testing the water temperature of the sanitizing cycle. He watched Nora wash her hands, timing her to ensure she scrubbed for the mandatory 20 seconds. He checked the expiration dates on the milk, the eggs, and the cheeses. He even checked the seal on the back door to ensure no pests could enter from the alley. I didn't say a word. I just stood against the wall and watched him work. Finally, Inspector Grant clicked his pen shut and walked over to me. He looked down at his clipboard, and then he looked up at me. His stern, unsmiling expression had softened into genuine confusion. "Miss Hart," Inspector Grant said slowly, "I inspect 20 commercial kitchens a week in this county. And I have to be honest with you, I've never seen a facility this immaculate." "Thank you, Inspector," I said quietly. "Your logs are flawless. Your cross-contamination protocols are textbook. Your walk-in cooler is operating at exactly 34 degrees, Grant continued, shaking his head. There isn't a single violation in this entire building. You scored a perfect 100. He pulled a bright green pass certificate from his clipboard, signed his name with a flourish, and handed it to me. "Can I ask you a question, Inspector?" I asked, holding the certificate. "Sure. You said the complaint was highly detailed. What exactly did it say?" Grant hesitated, but then he flipped a page on his clipboard. It was submitted anonymously through our online portal. The complainant claimed you were intentionally turning off the walk-in cooler overnight to save on electricity, and that you were serving expired poultry. The exact phrasing they used in the summary was... He paused, reading the text. "She is talented, but she cuts corners when she is under pressure." The blood rushed in my ears. It was the exact phrase Marianne had used in my kitchen 3 days ago. It was the exact narrative she had tried to feed the brides. She had submitted the anonymous complaint herself, hoping that the stress of the lost contracts had caused me to slip up, hoping the inspector would find a single out-of-date carton of milk so she could point to the public record and say, "See? I told you so." "Thank you, Inspector," I said, my voice hollow. He nodded, packed up his gear, and left the kitchen. Nora let out a massive breath of relief and slumped against the prep table. "We passed. Lena, we passed. We can post the certificate online. This proves the rumors are completely fake." I looked at the bright green paper in my hand. "It doesn't matter, Nora," I whispered. "What do you mean?" Nora asked, frowning. "The market doesn't care about a clean inspection report," I explained, the bitter reality of the industry settling over me. When people hear a rumor about food poisoning, it permanently alters their perception of the brand. A green piece of paper doesn't erase fear. The damage is already done. I was right. I posted the perfect inspection score on every social media platform I had. I emailed it to Evan at the venue. I sent it to the corporate clients. No one called back. The silence was absolute. My mother had successfully poisoned the well, and no amount of clean water was going to make it drinkable again. By Friday evening, I was sitting alone in my dark, quiet kitchen. Nora had gone home. The ovens were cold. The massive walk-in cooler hummed quietly, mostly empty now that we had donated the ruined Sterling wedding prep to a local shelter. I was looking at the lease agreement for the commercial space, trying to calculate the penalty for breaking it early. There was a hesitant knock on the heavy metal back door leading to the alley. I frowned. I walked over, looked through the reinforced peephole, and unlocked the door. A young man was standing in the alley, shivering slightly in the cool evening air. He looked to be in his early 20s, wearing a faded hoodie and jeans. I recognized him vaguely. His name was Caleb. He had worked as a line cook at Marianne's table for about a year. "Caleb?" I asked, opening the door wider. "What are you doing here?" "I'm sorry to bother you, Lena," Caleb said nervously, looking over his shoulder as if he were afraid someone had followed him. I heard what happened with your catering business. I heard what your mom is saying about you." "Yeah, it's been a rough week," I said defensively. "Did she send you here?" "No, God, no," Caleb said quickly, stepping into the light of the doorway. "She fired me 3 days ago." I paused. "Why?" Caleb looked down at his shoes, shifting his weight uncomfortably. I refused to serve a batch of cream sauce. It had been sitting in the lowboy fridge for 5 days. It smelled sour. I tried to throw it away, and Marianne caught me. She screamed at me in front of the whole line. She said food cost is too high to throw away sauce that can just be boiled down and reseasoned. When I told her it wasn't safe, she fired me on the spot. I stared at him. Boiling spoiled cream sauce didn't destroy the toxins produced by the bacteria. It was a severe, catastrophic violation of basic food safety. "She's been doing stuff like that for months, Lena," Caleb whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and guilt. "She tells everyone she runs a traditional, clean kitchen, but behind closed doors, it's a nightmare. She cuts corners on everything to maximize her profit margins." "Caleb, if that's true, why didn't you report her?" I asked. "Because she's Marianne Hart." Caleb scoffed bitterly. "She's best friends with the local politicians. She sponsors the Little League. If a 22-year-old line cook calls the health department, she'll just say, 'I'm a disgruntled employee who got fired for incompetence.' Nobody would believe me. But they might believe you." He reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out his phone. "I took pictures before she kicked me out," Caleb said. He unlocked the screen and handed the phone to me. I looked at the screen. I expected to see a dirty cutting board, or maybe some expired meat in a fridge. What I saw made my blood run cold. The photograph was taken in the back corner of Marianne's kitchen, near the heavy, commercial dishwashing machine. It was a macro shot, zoomed in on the gap between the heavy stainless steel wall plating and the actual drywall behind it. The caulking had rotted away, exposing the dark, damp cavity between the walls. Crawling up the drywall, spreading like a massive, terrifying black bruise, was a thick layer of toxic black mold. It wasn't just a small patch. It was a deeply entrenched, systemic fungal infestation. It was directly adjacent to the area where they washed the plates and silverware for hundreds of customers every single day. The spores from that mold would be circulating in the ambient air, settling on the clean dishes, and being served directly to the community. I swiped to the next photo. It was a shot of the internal basin of the commercial ice machine. The water filter was visibly black with grime. The plastic edges of the ice chute were coated in a thick, pink, slimy residue, a clear indication of airborne yeast and bacterial buildup. I swiped again. It was a close-up of the daily temperature log clipboard hanging on the walk-in cooler. The handwriting was Marianne's. The logs were filled out perfectly, noting safe temperatures for every single day of the week. But the photograph was time-stamped on a Tuesday, and Marianne had already filled out the perfect temperature logs for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. She was falsifying federal compliance documents. I handed the phone back to Caleb. My hands weren't shaking anymore. "She told me to spray bleach in the gap behind the stainless steel whenever it started to smell," Caleb whispered. "She said if the customers can't see it, it doesn't matter." I stood in the silence of my spotless, impeccably clean, bankrupt kitchen. I thought about the tears of the bride who had canceled my biggest contract. I thought about the anonymous complaint my mother had filed, trying to frame me for the exact crimes she was actively committing every single day. Marianne had built her entire reputation on the illusion of being a wholesome, caring mother feeding her community. She had used that exact reputation to publicly execute my career, claiming I was dangerous. "Can you send me those photos, Caleb?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. "Yeah. Are you going to post them online?" he asked, looking hopeful. "No," I replied, pulling my heavy compliance binder off the desk. "Internet rumors are for amateurs. I'm a professional." I looked at the photos on his phone one last time. My mother didn't just lie about my kitchen. She was hiding her own, and I was going to tear the walls down. There is a very specific, dangerous adrenaline that comes with realizing you have been fighting the wrong war. For weeks, I had been playing defense. I had been scrambling to prove my innocence, sending pristine inspection reports to people who had already made up their minds to hate me. I had been trying to outrun a lie, but Caleb's photographs changed everything. I didn't need to outrun the lie anymore. I just needed to expose the truth that my mother was desperately trying to hide. I didn't immediately call the health department. As a certified food safety auditor, I knew exactly how bureaucratic investigations worked. If I simply called and said my mother's kitchen was dirty, she would dismiss it as a bitter, bankrupt daughter trying to get petty revenge. Marianne was an expert at playing the victim. She would put on her cardigan, cry to the inspector about how her business was struggling, and probably get off with a minor warning and 30 days to fix a plumbing issue. To destroy a 30-year reputation built on fake community goodwill, I couldn't just throw a stone. I had to drop a nuclear bomb of undeniable, legally binding evidence. I started building the dossier that same night. I sat at my dining room table, my heavy compliance binder open. I printed out the high-resolution photographs Caleb had sent me, the massive, spreading black mold behind the stainless steel plate, the pink slime in the ice machine, and the falsified temperature logs. I had Caleb write a formal, sworn statement detailing exactly what he had witnessed. The instructions to spray bleach to hide the smell of mold, the order to reheat and serve 5-day-old spoiled cream sauce, and the fact that he was immediately terminated for raising a safety concern. He signed it, and I had it notarized the next morning. But I needed more. The photographs proved the kitchen was currently a hazard. But I needed to prove a historical pattern of deliberate, dangerous negligence. I spent 12 hours digging through the municipal public records database. I pulled the past 5 years of health inspection reports from Marianne's table. At first glance, they looked fine. Mostly Bs, a few minor dings for floor cleanliness. But as an auditor, I didn't look at the grades. I looked at the inspector notes. In 3 separate reports over 4 years, different inspectors had noted a persistent damp odor near the dishwashing station. Each time, Marianne had provided a receipt showing she had called a plumber to check for a leak, and the inspectors had cleared the violation. I cross-referenced the name of the plumbing company on those receipts. It was owned by my uncle, Marianne's brother. She wasn't fixing the leak. She was having her brother write fake invoices to satisfy the inspectors while the mold slowly rotted the walls from the inside out. But the most devastating piece of evidence, the final twist of the knife, came when I started investigating the specific rumor that had destroyed my business. The rumor that I had caused a mass food poisoning event. I tracked down the origin of the whisper through a sympathetic event coordinator who had felt guilty about canceling on me. She told me the rumor specifically referenced the mayor's charity fundraiser gala that occurred 9 months ago. Several prominent guests had gone home that night violently ill with severe gastrointestinal distress. I stared at the name of the event on my computer screen, feeling a slow, creeping horror wash over me. I remembered the mayor's gala perfectly. I had catered it. But I hadn't catered the entire event. Because I was just starting my business, I had only been contracted to provide the cold appetizers. The shrimp cocktail, the bruschetta, and the imported cheese platters. The hot buffet, the main course, had been catered by Marianne's table. I pulled my personal, archived temperature logs from that exact date. I had physical, documented proof that my cold appetizers had been stored and transported at exactly 34 degrees. No bacteria could have survived, let alone rapidly multiplied. In my prep chain, I pulled up the medical descriptions of the illness the guests had suffered. The onset time and symptoms were classic hallmarks of Bacillus cereus, or Staphylococcus aureus, bacteria that thrive in hot food that has been allowed to cool down to room temperature and then improperly reheated, like a massive batch of cream sauce left sitting in a broken lowboy fridge for 5 days. The realization hit me so hard I couldn't breathe. My mother hadn't just made up a random lie about food poisoning. She knew her kitchen had poisoned those guests at the mayor's gala. She knew she had served them compromised, temperature-abused food. But because the illness was never officially traced back by the city, she had gotten away with it. And then, 9 months later, when she needed a weapon to destroy my independent catering business, she took the exact crime she had committed, weaponized it, and pinned it entirely on me. She used the pain and sickness she had caused her own customers to destroy her own daughter. I looked at the massive stack of paper on my table. The photographs, the sworn testimony, the fake plumbing invoices, the temperature logs. I didn't feel sad anymore. I didn't feel the desperate childhood need for my mother's approval. That little girl who had scrubbed floors just to be told she was a good daughter was dead. In her place was a licensed, certified food safety auditor holding a loaded gun. It was Thursday afternoon. The restaurant was closed between the lunch and dinner rushes. I walked through the front doors of Marianne's table. The dining room was quiet, smelling of garlic and old wood. I walked past the empty booths, pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen, and walked directly back to my mother's small, cramped office. Marianne was sitting at her desk, counting cash from the lunch register. When she saw me, her face lit up with that familiar, artificial, triumphant smile. She thought I was finally broken. She thought I had come to surrender. "Lena!" Marianne gasped, standing up and opening her arms. "Oh, honey, I knew you'd come to your senses. Have you closed out the lease on your kitchen? We can move your equipment over this weekend. I'll even pay for the moving truck." I didn't step into her embrace. I stood in the doorway, holding a thin manila envelope. "I'm not here to move my equipment, Mom," I said quietly. Marianne lowered her arms, her smile faltering, replaced by a sharp, annoyed frown. "Then why are you here? If you're going to ask for a loan to keep that failing kitchen open?" The answer is no. I'm not throwing my hard-earned money down the drain. "I know about the mayor's gala," I said. Marianne froze. The air in the tiny office suddenly felt incredibly heavy. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice dropping an octave, losing all its maternal warmth. "I know that your hot buffet caused the food poisoning 9 months ago," I continued, my voice steady, devoid of any emotion. "I know that you reheated compromised cream sauce because your lowboy fridge was broken and you didn't want to pay the food cost to replace it. And I know that you spent the last month telling every bride in this county that I was the one who poisoned those guests." Marianne stared at me. Her face didn't show guilt. It showed absolute, furious calculation. She was trying to figure out how much I actually knew and who else I had spoken to. "You sound insane, Lena," Marianne scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest, immediately pivoting to gaslighting. "You're stressed because your business is failing. And now you're making up wild conspiracy theories to blame me for your own incompetence. It's pathetic." "I also know about the black mold behind the dish pit," I said. Marianne actually flinched. It was a microscopic movement, but I saw it. The mask finally slipped. "Caleb took photos before you fired him," I explained, pulling a single printed photograph from the manila envelope and dropping it onto her desk, right on top of the cash. "I know about the pink slime in the ice machine. and I know that you forge your temperature logs 3 days in advance." Marianne looked down at the horrifying photograph of the mold spreading up the inside of her walls. For a long moment, she didn't speak. She didn't deny it. She just stared at the proof of her own absolute negligence. When she finally looked up at me, the sweet community mother was completely gone. The woman looking back at me was cold, ruthless, and filled with decades of unchecked arrogance. "So what?" Marianne hissed, stepping around the desk, pointing a finger directly at my chest. "You think a photograph from a disgruntled, fired line cook proves anything? I've run this restaurant for 30 years. I feed the mayor. I cater the school board meetings. I am an institution in this town. If you try to show that picture to anyone, I will tell them you photoshopped it because you're a bitter, failing daughter trying to extort me." "I'm giving you one final chance, Mom," I said, ignoring her threat. "You are going to call Mrs. Sterling. You are going to call the corporate venues. You are going to tell them that you lied about my kitchen, and you are going to clear my name. If you do that, I will walk away." Marianne let out a loud, mocking laugh. "Or what, Lena?" she sneered, her eyes dark with malice. "You'll call the health inspector. Go ahead. By the time they process the complaint and schedule a visit next month, I'll have a contractor patch the wall and bleach the ice machine. You have no power here. You are nothing without me." She stepped closer, lowering her voice into a vicious whisper. "No one will believe a daughter who turns against her own mother." Marianne smiled, absolutely confident in her invincibility. "They'll just think you're crazy." I looked at the woman who had brought me into the world. I felt a profound, terrible sadness, but it wasn't for me. It was for her. She was so blinded by her own ego that she couldn't see the executioner standing right in front of her. "They don't have to believe me," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper as cold as the walk-in cooler. "Excuse me?" Marianne scoffed. "They don't have to believe me," I repeated, staring directly into her eyes. "They only have to open your walls." I turned around and walked out of the office. Marianne yelled after me, calling me ungrateful, calling me a failure, telling me I would never work in the county again. I didn't look back. I pushed through the swinging doors, walked out of the restaurant, and got into my car. I didn't drive home. I drove directly to the County Department of Public Health. I didn't submit an anonymous online complaint. I walked into the building, flashed my official state-issued food safety auditor badge to the receptionist, and demanded an immediate, closed-door meeting with the Director of Environmental Health. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across a heavy oak desk from Director Harris, the man who oversaw every single commercial kitchen inspection in the county. I didn't cry. I didn't complain about my mother ruining my business. I kept the entire conversation strictly, ruthlessly professional. "Director Harris," I said, placing my massive compliance binder on his desk, "I am submitting a formal Level 1 emergency hazard notification regarding a commercial food facility operating within your jurisdiction." Harris frowned, looking at my auditor badge. "Miss Hart, if you're working in a private auditor capacity, you know the protocol. You submit the findings to the business owner first." "I am not submitting this in a private capacity," I replied smoothly. "And because the facility in question is owned and operated by my immediate family member, Marianne Hart, I am formally submitting a recusal document citing a direct conflict of interest." I slid the signed recusal form across the desk. Harris looked surprised. "Marianne's table? You're filing an emergency hazard report against your mother's restaurant? I am reporting an active, systemic threat to public health." I corrected him. I opened the binder. I laid out the high-resolution photographs of the black mold. I presented the sworn, notarized affidavit from Caleb, detailing the intentional temperature abuse of the cream sauce. I provided the forged temperature logs and the cross-referenced plumbing receipts, proving a multi-year cover-up of structural water damage. Finally, I placed the medical reports from the mayor's gala next to the evidence of the broken lowboy fridge. Director Harris stared at the documents. The color slowly drained from his face. He wasn't looking at a minor cleanliness violation. He was looking at a massive, documented, multi-year conspiracy of negligence that had already resulted in public illness. "My God," Harris whispered, looking at the photograph of the black mold spreading near the clean dishes. This is catastrophic. How long has she been hiding this?" "Long enough," I said. Harris looked up at me. He saw the cold, absolute certainty in my eyes. He realized that because I had formally recused myself and submitted the evidence as a licensed auditor, he couldn't ignore it. If anyone got sick at that restaurant tomorrow, and it came to light that he had buried an official hazard report from a certified professional, he would lose his job and face federal charges. "I need you to authorize an immediate, unannounced, multi-agent inspection of that facility," I said quietly. "And you need to mandate the physical removal of the stainless steel plating behind the dish pit. If they just look at the surface, she will lie to them." Harris slowly closed the binder. He picked up his desk phone. "When do you want us to go in?" Harris asked. I looked at the calendar on his desk. Tomorrow was Sunday. It wasn't just any Sunday. It was the second Sunday in May. It was Mother's Day. Marianne's table was hosting its legendary annual Mother's Day charity brunch. It was the busiest, most profitable, most highly publicized day of the year for her restaurant. The dining room would be packed with local politicians, community leaders, and the exact same wealthy brides she had whispered her toxic lies to. Marianne was scheduled to give a speech about the importance of family, sacrifice, and wholesome community values. She wanted an audience. She wanted everyone to see her as the perfect mother. "Tomorrow," I said, looking Director Harris dead in the eye. "Go in tomorrow at noon." Mother's Day in the restaurant industry is universally recognized as the busiest, most high-stress, and most profitable day of the entire year. At Marianne's table, it wasn't just a busy Sunday. It was an event. My mother had spent the last 3 weeks heavily promoting her annual Mother's Day charity brunch. The dining room was absolutely packed to the brim, with over 200 guests. The local mayor was sitting at the premium center table. The event coordinators who had canceled my corporate contracts were eating Eggs Benedict near the window, and Mrs. Sterling, the mother of the bride, who had sobbed on the phone to me about my dangerous kitchen, was sipping a mimosa with her family in a cozy corner booth. Marianne was in her absolute element. She was wearing a beautiful floral dress, walking from table to table, kissing cheeks, shaking hands, and accepting the adoration of the community. At exactly 12:15 p.m., Marianne stood near the front of the dining room and lightly tapped her champagne glass with a silver spoon. The room quieted down. "I just want to take a moment to thank all of you," Marianne began, her voice radiating warmth, perfectly projecting across the silent dining room. "For 30 years, this restaurant has been my home. It has been a sanctuary of wholesome, honest community values. I have always believed that food is family. And when you sit at my tables, I promise you, I am protecting your family exactly the way I protect my own." The crowd murmured in absolute adoration. A few people clapped, but the applause was abruptly cut short. The heavy glass front doors of the restaurant swung open. Director Harris didn't send a single mid-level inspector to handle the complaint. He brought a strike team, 4 uniformed environmental health officers, wearing heavy utility belts and carrying massive, hard plastic equipment cases, walked directly into the dining room. They didn't wait to be seated. They didn't apologize for interrupting the speech. They marched straight past the stunned mayor, past the terrified hostesses, and pushed through the swinging doors directly into the kitchen. Marianne's face went completely pale. The microphone slipped slightly in her hand. For a fraction of a second, the sweet matriarch persona completely evaporated, replaced by the sheer, unadulterated panic of a woman who knew she was finally caught. "Excuse me, gentlemen," Marianne yelled, dropping the microphone and sprinting after them. "You can't go in there! We are in the middle of a massive service. I demand you step back out to the lobby. I wasn't in the dining room." But because I had filed the official hazard report, Director Harris had required me to be on site, outside the premises, in case the inspectors needed technical clarification on my auditor notes. I was sitting in my car, parked across the street, watching the entire thing unfold through the front windows. Inside the kitchen, absolute chaos erupted. Director Harris stood in the center of the hot, cramped line. The cooks stopped cooking. The dishwashers froze. Marianne Hart, "I am Director Harris with the County Department of Public Health," he announced, his voice easily carrying over the sound of the fryers. "We are executing an emergency hazard audit based on credible evidence of severe systemic safety violations. Clear the prep line." "This is an outrage," Marianne shrieked, her voice shrill and hysterical. "I have a perfect health score. My daughter is doing this to me. She's a bitter, bankrupt caterer trying to ruin my Mother's Day. You are trusting the lies of a jealous child." Harris didn't even look at her. He turned to his lead inspector. "Go to the walk-in cooler. Check the temperature logs against the ambient air thermometer. Then pull every single batch of cream-based sauce and temp it." He turned to his second inspector. "Check the internal basin of the ice machine." And then Harris walked directly over to the dishwashing pit in the back corner of the kitchen. "No," Marianne screamed, lunging forward, trying to physically grab Harris's arm. "You can't shut down my kitchen. I'm feeding the mayor." One of the inspectors stepped in front of Marianne, blocking her path. Harris looked at the heavy stainless steel plating bolted to the wall behind the dish sink. He pulled a cordless power drill from his equipment case. He didn't ask for permission. He placed the bit against the first heavy screw and pulled the trigger. The loud, aggressive whine of the drill echoed through the kitchen. Marianne started sobbing. It wasn't the fake, manipulative crying she used to get sympathy. It was the desperate, ugly sobbing of absolute ruin. Harris removed the 4 corner screws. He grabbed the edge of the heavy stainless steel plate and violently wrenched it away from the wall. The smell hit the kitchen instantly. It was a thick, suffocating, intensely foul odor of rotting drywall, stagnant water, and severe fungal decay. It was so strong that several of the line cooks immediately covered their mouths and backed away. Behind the shiny, perfectly polished stainless steel plate, the drywall was entirely black. The toxic mold had eaten through the structural framing, spreading upward like a massive, terrifying lung infection. It was damp, fuzzy, and actively releasing thousands of invisible spores into the air, circulating directly over the clean plates. "Oh my God," the second inspector whispered, backing away from the wall. Harris didn't flinch. He pulled out a high-powered flashlight and a digital camera, snapping dozens of photographs. "Director," the first inspector called out, emerging from the walk-in cooler. He was holding the clipboard. "The temperature logs are pre-filled for Monday and Tuesday of next week. And I just probed a 5-gallon batch of hollandaise sauce sitting in the lowboy. It's holding at 58 degrees. It's in the extreme danger zone. It's been sitting there for days." "What about the ice machine?" Harris asked. "Severe pink slime and active yeast cultures in the primary water filter," the second inspector confirmed. Harris turned around. He looked at Marianne, who was standing near the fryers, trembling, her face buried in her hands. "Marianne Hart," Harris said, his voice cold and loud enough to be heard through the swinging doors into the dining room. "Due to catastrophic, systemic violations of the Public Health Code, including the deliberate concealment of toxic fungal growth and the falsification of federal temperature documents, your operating license is suspended immediately." He pointed toward the front of the restaurant. "Turn off the ovens. Throw away the food. Evacuate the dining room," Harris ordered. "Your restaurant is closed. If a fire alarm goes off in a restaurant, people leave quickly, but they usually leave their coats and expect to come back. When a team of health inspectors marches into a dining room and orders an immediate evacuation due to a biological hazard, people do not walk. They run. From my car across the street, I watched the heavy glass doors of Marianne's table burst open. Over 200 wealthy, influential guests poured out onto the sidewalk. They looked horrified. Some of them were actively gagging, having smelled the horrific stench of the mold wafting out from the kitchen when the doors swung open. Mrs. Sterling was clutching her purse to her chest, looking absolutely disgusted. The event coordinators were frantically whispering to each other, pulling out their phones. The mayor was quickly ushered into his waiting town car by his security detail, clearly desperate to distance himself from the scandal. A moment later, Director Harris and his team walked out of the front doors. They weren't carrying clipboards anymore. They were carrying a massive, bright red and white adhesive notice. Harris peeled the backing off the sign. He pressed it firmly against the center of the heavy glass front door of Marianne's table, smoothing out the corners so there were absolutely no wrinkles. The bold black letters screamed at the entire street, close-dot, by order of the Kankakee Health Department. Imminent health hazard, asterisked. The crowd on the sidewalk went completely silent. They stared at the sign. They stared at the restaurant that had fed their families for 30 years, suddenly realizing that the wholesome, maternal image was nothing but a facade built over rot and poison. Then the door opened one last time. Marianne stumbled out onto the sidewalk. Her floral dress was rumpled. Her perfect hair was a mess. She looked frantically at the crowd of her former patrons, opening her mouth to speak, to offer an excuse, to weave one last lie. Nobody looked at her with sympathy. They looked at her with sheer, absolute revulsion. Marianne's eyes darted across the street. She saw my car. I rolled down my window. I didn't get out. I just sat there, looking at her. Marianne completely lost her mind. She pushed through the crowd of horrified guests, ran to the edge of the curb, and pointed a shaking, furious finger directly at me. "You did this!" Marianne screamed, her voice cracking, echoing down the busy street for everyone to hear. "You ruined me. My own daughter did this to me. You told them lies because your own business was failing." The crowd turned to look at me. Mrs. Sterling stared at me. The event coordinators stared at me. I didn't yell back. I didn't scream. I simply opened my car door, stepped out onto the asphalt, and looked at the woman who had spent the last month trying to destroy my life. "No," I said quietly, my voice perfectly calm, carrying easily across the silent street. "I didn't ruin you, Mom." I pointed at the bright red sign plastered to the glass door of her restaurant. "I reported what you hid," I said. "The black mold closed your restaurant. The fake temperature logs closed your restaurant. The people you poisoned at the mayor's gala closed your restaurant. I didn't lie. I just stopped letting you use my name to cover your filth." I got back into my car. I rolled up the window. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw my mother standing alone on the curb, surrounded by a crowd of people who would never, ever trust her again. The consequences for Marianne were brutal, absolute, and entirely permanent. When the official health department report was released to the public on Monday morning, it detailed the massive mold infestation, the pink slime in the ice machines, and the forged temperature logs. But the most devastating blow came when the department officially linked the specific bacterial strain found in her broken lowboy fridge to the mass illness at the mayor's gala 9 months prior. Marianne's table didn't just lose its operating license. It became a massive, multi-million-dollar liability. The landlord of the building immediately terminated her commercial lease, citing severe structural damage caused by the concealed mold. Her business insurance categorically denied coverage for the repairs, as the policy explicitly stated that intentional concealment of water damage constituted fraud. The city slapped her with massive fines for the falsified documents. She lost the restaurant. She lost her savings, trying to pay the fines. But worst of all, she lost her audience. She could no longer walk down the street and be greeted as the sweet matriarch of the community. She was the woman who had poisoned the mayor's guests to save $50 on a batch of cream sauce, and then tried to blame it on her own daughter. As for me, the truth spread exactly the way the rumors had, only faster. When the town realized that Marianne had orchestrated the entire smear campaign against my catering business to cover her own tracks, the guilt and outrage from my former clients was overwhelming. On Tuesday morning, my phone started ringing. Mrs. Sterling called, sobbing harder than she had the day she canceled, begging me to take the wedding contract back, offering to pay me double my original rate. Evan, the venue manager, called to formally apologize, promising me exclusive preferred vendor status for the entire upcoming wedding season. The corporate clients who had abandoned me suddenly realized that I was the only caterer in the county who possessed an impeccable, independently verified, perfect health score. I didn't take all the contracts back immediately. I set boundaries. I raised my prices by 20% across the board. I instituted non-refundable deposit clauses, and I made it a mandatory part of every single contract that my clients were physically welcome to inspect my commercial kitchen at any time without notice. By the end of the year, Lena's Table Catering wasn't just surviving. It was thriving. I paid off my initial business loan. I hired 2 more delivery crews. I gave Nora a massive raise and promoted her to sous chef. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The kitchen was spotless. The stainless steel gleamed. The walk-in cooler hummed steadily at exactly 34 degrees. I was standing near the prep tables, teaching a free community class on basic food safety protocols for local small business owners. I showed them how to properly calibrate a digital thermometer. I explained the dangers of cross-contamination. I showed them how to properly document a daily temperature log without cutting corners. After the class ended and the attendees left, Nora began wiping down the tables with a fresh sanitizing cloth. She paused, looking at me. "Lena," Nora asked softly, "do you ever feel sorry for her? Do you ever regret what happened?" I walked into my small office in the back of the kitchen. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Sitting underneath a stack of blank invoices was a small, framed photograph. It was a picture of me when I was 12 years old, standing in the kitchen of Marianne's table, wearing an apron that was entirely too large for me, scrubbing a massive pot. In the background of the photo, Marianne was looking at me, her arms crossed, her expression highly critical. I looked at the little girl in the photograph. I thought about the decades of manipulation, the constant belittling, and the final, brutal attempt to destroy the only thing I had ever built for myself. I placed the photograph back in the drawer and closed it firmly. "No, Nora," I said, walking back out into my clean, perfectly safe kitchen. My mother spent months telling people my kitchen was dangerous. In the end, mine was the only kitchen still open. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to spread vicious rumors. I didn't need revenge served cold. I just served the truth at the right temperature. And I didn't destroy my mother's restaurant. I just stopped letting her poison everything I built. So tell me honestly, if your own family tried to ruin your livelihood with a lie, would you have suffered in silence? Or would you have opened the walls? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one.